God, amen. So today is a unique Sunday because it comes from the month of Nesi. You know, in the Coptic year, there's 365 days, but there's 12 months that are broken up, or they're all equal in length. They're all 30 days. So 12 times 30, we have 360. The 5 remaining days to get us to 365 is this month. It's called the short month because it's only 5 days. So there's 13 months in the Coptic calendar, 12 times 30, and then one short one. If it's a leap year, instead of 5 days, it's 6 days. And today's reading comes from Matthew 24. The Gospel of Matthew, has 5 parts, and St. Matthew wrote it to the Jews. It was written in Hebrew possibly, or maybe Aramaic, and it was written directly to the Jews, and he wrote it kind of like in 5 sections to match the 5 parts of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And this section here is from Matthew 24. One of the sections is Matthew 23, 24, and 25, where Christ speaks on the eschatological themes. So eschatology is the end times. He speaks of the end of the world. And today's gospel comes from the Olivet Discourse, where he's on the Mount of Olives. And soon we're going to be celebrating, in a few days, we're going to be celebrating Nairuz. This is the Coptic New Year. So, the New Year sometimes is January 1st, for example, in the Gregorian calendar. In the Coptic calendar, we begin it in September, and it had to do with the rising of the waters. So even before Christianity came to Egypt, this was known as the time where it's the rising of the waters. It was a flooding in a good sense, not flooding destroying cities, but the good type of flooding where the river rises and it gives water to all of the crops and so on. So the church baptized this, so to speak, and made it the feast of the martyrs. So the Coptic New Year, we celebrate it by celebrating all the martyrs of the church. And that's why when you walk into a Coptic church, there's so much red. Even the carpet, we always make sure that it's red, because this symbolizes the blood of the martyrs. The blood of the martyrs, and this is how we celebrate it. So the question for us today is, how do we think of martyrdom? Sometimes we think it's just something that happens to certain people. It happened long ago, or maybe like the icon we have here, the 21 martyrs of Libya. It happened 2015, but still, it's very rare. And so maybe we don't think about it much. But the church actually reminds us of it constantly. Maybe different types of martyrdom, but at least some sort of martyrdom. How much do we think of our eternity? Do we think of our spiritual life in the end of our life? St. John Chrysostom, the Golden Mouth, in his, there's a book called On Marriage and Family Life that collects a lot of his sermons on marriage and family life. He says, concern for spiritual things will unite the family. The way to have a family be united is by having them be concerned for spiritual things, not money, not things here on earth, not perfecting every little thing in human life, but concern for spiritual things. This is what unites the family, young families, older families, any family. And I want to read to you a portion from St. Ignatius of Antioch. He's one of the early saints of the church. We have his icon here. He's being devoured by lions in the corner right there because he was killed in the Colosseum. And he died in 110 AD, maybe even 107 AD. So very early on. His teacher was St. John the Beloved. St. John, who wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, the book of Revelation. This was his direct disciple. He lived with him for years. And so this is one of the important things about patristics, by the way, the study of the church fathers, is in the Orthodox Church, this is how we understand the Bible. It's through the people that lived with the biblical authors. There's many disciples that we call the early church fathers who became bishops of the church, who died for the church, and they defended the church, and they lived with the apostles and disciples, and we have their writings till now, and it fills up volumes. And this is how we understand the Bible, through their writings, because they were there with them. But as he was on his way, he was being taken by soldiers, and the Roman Empire was cracking down on Christianity, and they wanted to kill the bishops and the priests, especially the bishops, because you kill the bishop, you strike the shepherd, and the flock will scatter. So they were going after all the bishops, his friend right next to him was being burned alive, St. Polycarp of Smyrna, also a bishop who died. Anyway, he was being taken by the Romans to the Colosseum, and he ended up dying there. On the way there, he wrote 7 letters, and we still have all 7 of those letters intact. And one of them was written to the people in Rome, the Christians in Rome, because he was heading to Rome, and he knew there were Christians there that maybe could have put a stop to it. They were powerful people, they were in positions of power. Maybe they would have found a way to get to the emperor and say, no, this is a good person, don't kill him. And they would have put an end to his martyrdom. And let me read to you just a portion of what he writes to them, and to show you how much he actually desired to be a martyr and sacrifice his life for God. He says, I am writing to all the churches and assuring them that I shall die for God of my own free will, so long as you do not hinder me. And he tells them, as long as you don't stop the plan, I will die for God. I beg you not to show me an unseasonable kindness. Let me become food for the wild beasts, for it is through them that I can reach God. And he says, it is better for me to die for Jesus Christ than to reign over all the ends of the earth. And he says, may I enjoy the wild beasts that are prepared for me, and I pray that I will find them eager to rush upon me. He says, even if the wild beasts are there, the lions or the tigers or whatever it is, that were going to devour him, he says, if they're full, they're not hungry, I'll entice them so that they attack me, because I want to be a sacrifice for God. And he says, come fire and cross, come crowds of wild beasts, come tearing, breaking, and dislocation of bones, come hacking off of limbs, come crushing of my whole body, and come the cruel tortures of the devil. Only let me reach Jesus Christ. And of course, this is an extreme example, but it shows you the mentality of an early church father who was the bishop of Antioch, one of the major cities, one of the original sees of Christianity. And it shows you how much he cared about being a sacrifice of God. And like Tertullian said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. You know, you're planting a young tree, instead of with water, with the blood of the martyrs, so to speak. You kill one Christian, and then you end up with 10 more Christians. This is how Christianity early on spread so quickly, because of the early martyrs that were dying, and they were killing Christians, so you think Christianity would shrink. But every time they would kill a Christian, many more would become Christian. Another great example of Christianity in the early church, we have his icon here as well, St. Anthony the Great, the first monastic. And St. Anthony, he was born a little bit south of Cairo in a place called Ben Suef. And we have his biography written by St. Athanasius himself, the Pope of the Church, the 20th Patriarch, who was the leader in the Council of Nicaea, early 300s. And the great St. Athanasius, who was at Nicaea, he wrote the Nicene Creed, he wrote on the Incarnation. He became the Patriarch of the whole church. He reigned, as a Patriarch for 52 years. And he was proud that when he was a young man, he poured water on the hands of St. Anthony the Great, the first monastic. And this is the job of a servant, to pour water on someone's hands at that time and to wash their hands and feet. But he was proud, as Patriarch of Alexandria, he was proud that when he was a young man, he was able to pour water on the great St. Anthony's hands. And he wrote the biography of St. Anthony. And when he went into the wilderness, he stayed there. He lived until he was about 100 years old. And he lived in the desert and wilderness his whole life. He only came out of the wilderness twice. And one of the times was to stand along St. Athanasius against Arianism. The other time was when there was a lot of persecution during the time of Diocletian, before Emperor Constantine, put out the Edict of Milan and legalized Christianity. But before that, when there was a lot of martyrdom going on, he came out and he went so that he could be martyred as well. He wanted to be a sacrifice for God. And when he went there, he went to Alexandria, and he saw the people that were in prison, and they were on their way. They were coming up next to be martyred. He went there, and he was encouraging them. He was saying, don't turn back now. He was saying, have courage, and he was caring for them. He was supplying them with food and encouragement and so on. And he stayed there for so long. So many people were martyred, but it never came to his turn. They never martyred him. And he was sad. This is why he left the wilderness and went to Alexandria. He ended up going back to his cave, back into the mountains, into the wilderness. And, St. Athanasius writes, he missed out on his chance to be martyred, so to speak. And he writes these beautiful words. And so Anthony, having not been martyred, returned back to the desert to be martyred daily. He went to Alexandria and he didn't die there, but he came back to his cave and he died daily to himself. He died through his spiritual struggles. He died to his sin. He died to his flesh. And this is the type of martyrdom that the church wants us to focus on. It's a very small chance that, we die physically for Christ. But the other form of martyrdom that we all have to focus on, and the church constantly reminds us of, is dying to our flesh, dying to our desires, dying to our sin, dying to ourselves. This is the type of martyrdom the church expects of us. So every day we have the opportunity to die to our desires, to die to our needs, to love people that mistreat us, the opportunity to forgive others. This is a form of dying to myself, where I forget my ego and my pride, and even if someone offended me, I have the opportunity to forgive them and to die to myself. I have the opportunity to witness Christ, the opportunity to deny my greed that separates me from God. And I have the opportunity to trust God even when life seems like it's falling apart around me. I have the opportunity to trust in Him and to die to my belief in myself, my belief in my ability. So this is how we become martyrs of the church. Not physically, but we live for Christ. We die to ourselves like the 21 martyrs did. And now that we're coming to the end of the Coptic year, this is one of the ways we can, focus and start preparing for the new year. We can say, okay, what things can I change in my life? What can I at least admit, to myself, like the shortcomings of my life? Can I at least admit to them and say, I want to change? St. Paul says in Romans 12, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. So usually a sacrifice is something that is killed. If you sacrifice an animal, you kill the animal. He says, present your bodies a living sacrifice. Even while we're alive here on earth, we sacrifice everything. Holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So how are we living sacrifices? But not being the same as the world, not conforming to the world, but transforming ourselves by the renewing of our mind. And I'll end with this, to really change our lives, and sometimes we feel like we're stuck, like everything's just a routine. We don't really have, a zealous relationship with God. It feels like everything's the same. Maybe, during church or on Sundays, I feel like, okay, I really want to take action. And then the rest of the week, I feel like I'm stuck or I'm struggling. And one of the ways to break this routine is to spend more time alone by myself, or maybe to take a personal retreat. We have the monastery, for example, in Texas, in Corpus Christi. I encourage a lot of people to register for a few days to go there by yourself, spend a few days. You can even get to know some of the monks that live there. You can spend time with yourself, or the convent that the diocese owns in Georgia, where the nuns and sisters live. So this is a personal retreat that I take to change up the routine, to change my life, to say I want to focus these 3 days, and maybe I'll do a silent retreat where I don't speak to anyone. I just go there and focus on myself. Or even if it's not a silent retreat, I go there, but I spend more time alone, just me and God. May God grant us all the blessings of the Coptic New Year and help us all to learn to die daily, and glory be to God forever. Amen.